Think about the last time you walked into a room and forgot why you went there. And now notice what just happened inside your brain when I said that. It searched, it scanned, it reached back and tried to pull something forward, and for just a half second, it hesitated. Most people feel that hesitation and quietly file it away under one word: aging. But what if I told you that hesitation is not age? What if I told you it is a signal? And more importantly, what if I told you that signal can be reversed? Here is what nobody is telling you. Your brain is changing right now in this exact moment as you watch this video. It is either strengthening or weakening based on the signals you are sending it every single day. And the difference between those two directions is not genetics. It is not luck. It is not something you lost in your 40s and can never get back. It comes down to four specific science-backed habits. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly what they are, why they work at the biological level, and how to put them into practice starting today. My name is Dr. Megan Foster. I have spent over 2 decades in clinical and surgical practice. And I want to be honest with you about something. When I first started my career, I taught patients that cognitive decline was largely a one-way street. Focus slows with age, memory fades, processing speed drops. That is what the textbook said, that is what I believed, and that is what I passed along. The science of neuroplasticity proved me wrong. And today I want to share with you what the research actually shows, because the gap between what most people believe about their aging brain and what is actually possible is enormous. Before we get into the habits themselves, I want you to do something simple. I want you to compare yourself now to who you were 15 or 20 years ago. Not in dramatic ways, just in small, quiet ways. Names used to come faster, did they not? You could walk into a room and know exactly why you were there. You could read something once and it would stick. You could juggle 3 things at once without feeling like one of them was going to fall. It is not catastrophic. Nothing broke. It is just slightly different. And here's the most important thing I want you to understand. That difference was not automatically programmed into your biology. It was not inevitable. The brain does not have to follow that pattern. The research is clear on this, and today we are going to walk through exactly why and exactly what to do about it. Let me start by explaining something that will make every single habit in this video make more sense. Think of your brain as a network of roads. The roads you travel on every day, the ones your brain uses constantly, those roads stay wide and smooth and well-maintained. The roads you stop using, the pathways that go without stimulation, those roads start to crack, narrow, and eventually become hard to travel at all. That is neuroplasticity. Your brain physically remodels itself based on how you use it. This is not a metaphor. This is measurable structural change that shows up on brain scans. Now add another layer to that picture. Those roads also require oxygen and nutrients delivered through a network of tiny blood vessels. When circulation is strong, those vessels deliver what the brain needs to function well. When circulation is compromised, when there is inflammation in the walls of those vessels or metabolic stress in the surrounding tissue, the delivery slows. Less blood flow means slower signaling. Slower signaling feels like brain fog. It feels like that half-second delay when you are trying to recall a name. It feels like mental fatigue showing up earlier in the afternoon than it used to. Nothing is broken. The system is just not optimized. And the extraordinary thing is this: when you restore blood flow, reduce inflammation, and give the brain the right stimulation and the right nutrients, those pathways widen again. The delivery system improves, recall gets faster, focus sharpens. This is not theory. This is documented in peer-reviewed research, and we are going to go through that evidence today. Now, I also want to explain something that almost nobody talks about, which is the role of BDNF. BDNF stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. You do not need to remember that term, but you do need to understand what it does because it is central to everything we are discussing today. Think of BDNF as fertilizer for your brain. When BDNF levels are high, the brain grows new connections, strengthens existing pathways, and protects neurons from breaking down. When BDNF levels are low, the brain loses its ability to adapt. Connections weaken, and the natural wear of aging accelerates. Here's the critical part. BDNF does not just happen on its own. Your body produces it in response to specific signals. The right kind of movement is the most powerful of those signals. But nutrition plays a role too, as do certain micronutrients that most people over 50 are quietly deficient in. By the end of this video, you will understand how to trigger BDNF production naturally, what foods support it, what habits suppress it, and why this one biological factor is the difference between a brain that is declining and a brain that is rebuilding. Let me start with the habits that require the least effort, and then we will build toward the most powerful one at the end. The first habit is one that is almost universally dismissed, and I want to acknowledge that because I used to dismiss it too. A daily multivitamin. I know what you are thinking. That sounds too simple. And honestly, for years, the conventional medical view was that multivitamins were largely unnecessary if you ate a reasonably balanced diet. I shared that view. Most of my colleagues did. Then the Cosmos Web trial was published. This was a large, rigorous, randomized controlled trial. It followed over 3,500 adults for 3 years. Half of them took a daily multivitamin, half took a placebo. At the end of 3 years, the researchers measured cognitive performance in both groups. The group taking the multivitamin showed measurable improvement in memory tests. Not marginal improvement. Improvement equivalent to approximately 3 years of preserved cognitive function compared to the placebo group. 3 years from a daily multivitamin. So why does this work and why does it matter specifically after 50? As we age, our ability to absorb certain nutrients from food decreases. It is not that people are eating badly, though sometimes they are. It is that the digestive system becomes less efficient at extracting and absorbing specific micronutrients even from a good diet. Two of the most important ones for brain health are B vitamins and antioxidants. B vitamins, particularly B6, B9, and B12, are responsible for controlling a compound called homocysteine. You may have heard of homocysteine before. When levels of this compound rise in the blood, research shows a direct association with shrinkage of brain tissue, particularly in the memory centers. B vitamins keep homocysteine in check. Antioxidants, things like vitamin C and vitamin E, protect neurons from oxidative stress. Every time your brain cells fire and do their work, they produce a small amount of chemical waste. Antioxidants neutralize that waste before it accumulates and damages the cell membranes. When antioxidant levels are low, that damage compounds quietly over years. The practical application here is not complicated. One high-quality daily multivitamin, no mega doses, no expensive stacks of individual supplements, just a solid baseline multivitamin that fills the gaps you may not even know exist. The most common mistake people make with this habit is expecting to feel something dramatic right away. You will not. This is slow infrastructure repair. Think of it like maintaining the plumbing in your house. You do not notice when it is working correctly. You only notice when it fails. A daily multivitamin is maintenance. Now, let me add something here that the Cosmos Web trial also revealed, because I think it is important context. The cognitive benefit of the multivitamin was most pronounced in people who had existing nutritional gaps at the start of the trial. That means the people who needed it most got the most benefit. And after 50, most people have some gaps, even people who think they are eating well. The second habit involves a food that spent decades being unfairly blamed for things it did not cause. And as a result, many people over 50 have quietly avoided it for years. Eggs, specifically the yolk. Your brain relies on a molecule called acetylcholine to process memory and sustain attention. Acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter, which just means it is a chemical messenger that allows brain cells to communicate with each other. When acetylcholine levels are adequate, memory encoding is sharp, attention is focused, and the brain is able to retrieve information quickly. To produce acetylcholine, your brain needs a raw material called choline, and egg yolks are one of the richest dietary sources of choline available. When choline intake is low, the brain has less of what it needs to produce acetylcholine. Signals slow, focus drifts. The mental sharpness you used to take for granted starts to feel inconsistent. A randomized clinical trial published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition followed older adults who consumed egg yolks daily. Within 12 weeks, the group eating egg yolks showed meaningful improvement in verbal memory compared to those who did not. 12 weeks. That is a relatively short window to see measurable change, and it came from a simple dietary addition. Now I want to address the concern that many of you may have because I hear this frequently. What about cholesterol? The relationship between dietary cholesterol and cardiovascular risk is far more nuanced than the simple warning that was communicated to the public for several decades. Current research and major nutritional guidelines no longer support the idea that moderate egg consumption significantly raises cardiovascular risk in healthy adults. For most people, 1 to 2 eggs daily is well within a range that is both safe and genuinely beneficial for brain function. If you have specific cardiovascular concerns, speak with your own physician. That is always the right approach. But if you have been avoiding eggs for years based on older advice, it is worth revisiting that conversation with your doctor. For those who do not eat eggs, fatty fish is an excellent alternative source of choline. Salmon, sardines, and mackerel provide meaningful amounts along with other nutrients that are also beneficial for the brain, which we will touch on in a moment. The most common mistake with this habit is over-supplementing choline rather than getting it from food. Choline supplements are available, but whole food sources are generally better absorbed and come packaged with other nutrients that work together. Food first is almost always the right approach. The third habit is one that gets dismissed as superfood hype, and I understand why. The health and wellness space has a long history of attaching inflated claims to specific foods and then moving on when the next trend arrives. But blueberries are genuinely different, and the research behind them is specific and consistent. Blueberries are rich in a class of compounds called anthocyanins. These are the pigments that give blueberries their deep blue-purple color, and they do something quite specific in the body. They increase the production of a molecule called nitric oxide, which causes blood vessel walls to relax and become more flexible. When blood vessel walls are more flexible, circulation improves. When circulation improves, the brain receives more oxygen and more of the nutrients it depends on. Better delivery means faster signaling, sharper recall, and reduced mental fatigue. Multiple randomized controlled trials have demonstrated measurable improvements in immediate memory and recall within 12 weeks of daily blueberry consumption. Some of the strongest results came from trials where participants consumed the equivalent of about 1 cup of blueberries per day, fresh or frozen. Frozen blueberries are just as effective as fresh ones for this purpose. The anthocyanins survive the freezing process well, which makes this habit accessible and affordable year-round. Now, here's something that I think gets overlooked when people talk about blueberries for brain health. The benefit is not just about delivering nutrients. The improvement in blood vessel flexibility matters throughout the entire brain. It means that the roads we talked about earlier, those neural pathways, are getting better delivery of everything they need to stay strong and to build new connections. When you combine that with the other habits in this video, particularly the one we are about to discuss, the effects are compounding. The most common mistake people make with this habit is substituting blueberry products, things like blueberry muffins, blueberry juice with added sugar, or blueberry-flavored supplements for actual whole blueberries. Those products do not deliver the same benefit. Many of them actively work against it because the added sugar triggers inflammation that counteracts what the anthocyanins are trying to do. 1 cup of whole blueberries, fresh or frozen. That is it. Now, let me pause for a moment because we are about to discuss the most important and most evidence backed intervention in this entire video. And before I do, I want to say something that I think is important. The first 3 habits we discussed, the multivitamin, the eggs, the blueberries, those are what I would call foundation habits. They fill nutritional gaps, they support neurotransmitter production, and they improve circulation. They are all meaningful and all worth doing. But if you do all 3 of those and you skip the 4th one, you are leaving the majority of the benefit on the table. Because without the 4th habit, the growth signal that tells your brain to rebuild and strengthen is simply not being produced. And no amount of nutrition can fully compensate for the absence of that signal. Let me explain what that signal is. Earlier, I mentioned BDNF, the fertilizer for your brain. Research consistently shows that the single most powerful trigger for BDNF production in the human body is sustained aerobic exercise, not supplements, not brain training games, not meditation, though that has other benefits worth discussing another time. Aerobic exercise. When you elevate your heart rate and sustain it for a meaningful period of time, your brain interprets that as a signal that your body is active, engaged, and navigating a demanding environment. In response, it ramps up BDNF production. New neural connections form. Existing pathways strengthen. The hippocampus, which is the region of the brain most associated with memory formation, receives a growth signal that it does not get from any other source. Now, let me give you the specific study that I think every single person over 50 should know about. In 2011, a randomized controlled trial was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. This is one of the most respected scientific journals in the world. The researchers took a group of older adults and divided them into 2 groups. One group did moderate aerobic exercise 3 times per week for 1 year. The other group did stretching and toning exercises on the same schedule. At the end of the year, the researchers used brain imaging to measure the size of the hippocampus in both groups. In the stretching group, the hippocampus had shrunk. That is the normal aging pattern. About 1 to 2% shrinkage per year is expected. In the aerobic exercise group, the hippocampus had grown by 2%. That means the aerobic exercise group did not just slow the decline. They reversed it. They effectively undid 1 to 2 years of brain aging in 12 months through exercise alone. That is structural change. That is measurable growth in the part of the brain most responsible for memory. Not motivational language, not a theory. Documented, peer-reviewed evidence. And the exercise protocol was not extreme. It was 40 to 45 minutes of brisk walking 3 times per week. That was it. No running, no gym membership required, no intense training. Brisk walking 3 times a week for a year. Now, let me explain the biological mechanism, because understanding why something works makes it far easier to stay consistent with it. When you exercise aerobically, several things happen simultaneously in the brain. Blood flow increases, which delivers more oxygen and glucose to neurons. Insulin sensitivity improves in brain tissue, which matters more than most people realize because insulin resistance in the brain is increasingly linked to cognitive decline. Inflammation decreases because regular aerobic exercise is one of the most effective anti-inflammatory tools we have, and BDNF levels rise, triggering the growth and strengthening of neural connections. Of these effects, the BDNF increase is the one I want to spend a moment on because it connects directly to what we already discussed about neuroplasticity. Remember the road analogy. New roads being built, existing roads being widened. BDNF is the construction crew. Without it, the roads you are not actively using continue to degrade and no new routes get established. With it, the brain has the raw biological capacity to grow, adapt, and compensate even as natural aging continues. And here's something else I want you to understand about BDNF. It does not just respond to a single exercise session. It responds to consistent, repeated exercise over time. The studies show that the effect compounds. The longer you maintain the habit, the higher your baseline BDNF levels become, and the more structural protection your brain has. This is why I keep saying that aerobic exercise is not just fitness, it is the primary remodeling trigger for your brain. Now, I want to address the most common objection I hear from patients when I bring this up because it is a reasonable one. What if you have not exercised in years? What if your joints hurt, or you have cardiovascular concerns, or you simply do not know where to start? Start with 10 minutes. Seriously, 10 minutes of walking at a moderate pace is a meaningful beginning. You are not training for anything. You are not trying to hit a number. You are just sending your brain a signal that your body is active. And then you build from there slowly and consistently. The target, based on the research, is eventually reaching about 60 to 75% of your maximum heart rate and sustaining that for 40 to 45 minutes. For most people, that is a pace where you can still hold a conversation, but you are aware that you are exerting yourself. Not gasping for air, just comfortably elevated. If you have any cardiovascular conditions or have been completely sedentary for an extended period, please check in with your doctor before beginning. That is not a legal disclaimer, that is genuine advice. Starting from a place of proper information is always better, but for most people, the barrier to starting is not medical, it is motivational. And the honest thing to say about that is this: the motivation tends to come after you begin, not before. Once you are a few weeks in and you start noticing that your thinking is clearer, that you have more energy in the afternoon, that you are sleeping a little better, it becomes much easier to stay consistent. Those early changes in how you feel happen because blood flow improves relatively quickly, often within just a few weeks of starting a consistent aerobic routine. The structural changes, the hippocampal growth, the lasting BDNF elevation, those take longer, but you will feel the difference before you see it on a brain scan. Now I want to connect something that I think is genuinely important and that most conversations about brain health completely skip over. Many people focus on mental exercises when they think about cognitive health: puzzles, word games, learning a new language, memory training apps. And these things are not without value. Cognitive stimulation absolutely matters. The roads you use more often do stay stronger. But here is the problem: cognitive stimulation exercises the roads. Aerobic exercise expands the entire infrastructure that those roads depend on. If you do puzzles every day, but your blood flow is poor, your BDNF is low, your brain has elevated inflammation, and you are nutritionally depleted, you are trying to drive faster on deteriorating roads with clogged fuel lines. The habits in this video address the infrastructure first. And when the infrastructure is healthy, everything else works better. Your sleep improves, your mood stabilizes, your ability to learn and retain new information sharpens. Even cognitive exercises become more effective because the brain they are running on is better resourced. This is the part most mainstream advice overlooks, and it is also the reason why isolated approaches often disappoint people. It is not that brain games do not help, it is that they help most when the biological foundation is strong. Before I move on, I also want to address something that comes up constantly when patients start making progress with these habits and then hit a plateau or feel like things have stalled. And that is the role of chronic stress. Stress is not inherently bad for the brain. Short bursts of stress, the kind that come from a challenging problem or a physical workout, actually stimulate growth. They are part of what drives BDNF production. The brain was designed to handle acute stress. The problem is chronic, unrelenting stress. When the body is under sustained stress, it produces elevated levels of cortisol. In short bursts, cortisol is fine. But when cortisol stays high for days, weeks, or months, it begins to damage the hippocampus directly. It inhibits neuroplasticity. It suppresses BDNF. and it elevates the kind of systemic inflammation we have been talking about throughout this video. I am not going to oversimplify this by saying just relax and your brain will be fine. I understand that chronic stress is often tied to real circumstances in life that are not easy to change. But I do want you to be aware of it as a factor. Because if you are implementing all four of these habits consistently and not seeing the progress you expected, chronic stress may be the counterweight working against you. Aerobic exercise, as it happens, is one of the most effective known tools for regulating cortisol. This is another reason why it sits at the top of the list. It does not just build the brain up, it actively reduces one of the forces that is tearing it down. Let me now spend a few minutes on something that relates to the aerobic exercise discussion, but extends it because I think it adds important context. Beyond BDNF, aerobic exercise also improves what researchers call cerebrovascular reserve. That is the brain's ability to rapidly increase blood flow to regions that suddenly need more of it, like when you are concentrating hard on a problem, navigating a new environment, or trying to recall specific information quickly. Think of it like this. When you turn on multiple appliances in a house at once, you need the electrical system to have enough capacity to handle the sudden demand. Cerebrovascular reserve is the brain's electrical capacity. Exercise builds it. Eyes. People with higher cerebrovascular reserve not only think more clearly under normal conditions, they are also more resilient when stress, illness, or a period of poor sleep temporarily taxes the brain. The decline in these situations is less steep, and recovery is faster. This is one of the reasons why people who have maintained consistent aerobic fitness throughout middle age show significantly lower rates of cognitive impairment later in life, even after controlling for other factors. The research on this is consistent across decades of population studies. The message is not that exercise guarantees immunity from cognitive decline. Nothing does. But it is the single most modifiable factor we have identified, meaning it is the one most within your control and most responsive to change. Now let me bring all four habits together in a way that shows how they interact, because this is where the real power comes from. Start with the multivitamin. It closes the nutritional gaps that are silently limiting your brain's performance. It keeps homocysteine in check. It provides the antioxidant protection your neurons need daily. Add the eggs or an equivalent choline source. This gives your brain the raw material to produce the neurotransmitters that make memory and attention possible. Without adequate choline, even a well-exercised brain struggles to communicate efficiently at the cellular level. Add the blueberries. The anthocyanins improve the flexibility and function of the blood vessels serving the brain. Better circulation means better delivery of everything your brain needs, including the oxygen and nutrients that fuel the growth signals we are about to trigger. And then add the aerobic exercise, 3 sessions per week, building toward 40 to 45 minutes. This produces the BDNF that tells your brain to grow. It expands the infrastructure. It reduces inflammation. It improves insulin sensitivity in brain tissue. It gives the hippocampus the signal it needs to physically increase in volume. Each habit supports the others. The improved circulation from blueberries means more oxygen reaches the brain during exercise, making the workout more effective. The BDNF produced by exercise makes the brain more responsive to the nutrients it is receiving from the diet. The choline from eggs helps build the new neural connections that BDNF is prompting the brain to form. This is not 4 separate interventions. It is a system. And a system is what produces the kind of results that last. Now I want to talk about something that often gets in the way of people actually maintaining these habits, because the information alone is rarely enough. Understanding why something works is important. But there is a gap between understanding and doing. And I want to be honest about what fills that gap. The first thing that fills it is realistic expectation management. None of these habits will produce dramatic changes overnight. The blueberries and the choline from eggs will begin making a difference in your neurotransmitter levels relatively quickly. You may notice subtle improvements in focus and recall within a few weeks. The exercise will improve blood flow fairly quickly, which translates to some mental clarity benefits early on. But the structural changes, the hippocampal growth, the lasting BDNF elevation, the reduction in neuroinflammation, those take months. The study I mentioned followed participants for a full year. If you try this for 2 weeks and expect to feel 20 years younger, you will be disappointed and you will quit. If you commit to a genuine 30 to 90 day trial with realistic expectations, you will start noticing enough to want to continue. The second thing is habit stacking. The most effective way to build these habits into your life is to attach them to things you are already doing. If you already drink coffee in the morning, your blueberries and eggs can become part of that same routine. Your multivitamin goes with the same glass of water you drink when you wake up. Your walks become something you pair with a podcast, or a phone call, or simply time you protect for yourself before the day gets busy. You do not need willpower for habits that are already woven into your routine. You just need the architecture in place. The third thing is tracking, not obsessively, but keeping a simple log of your energy, your focus, and your recall over time gives you real data instead of impressions. Most people find that when they look back at a 30 or 60-day log, the trend is much clearer than it felt day to day. That clarity is motivating. I also want to spend a moment on something that connects to this entire conversation, but is often left out of discussions about brain health, and that is sleep. Sleep is not a passive state. Your brain uses sleep to consolidate memories, clear metabolic waste, and repair cellular damage from the day. The glymphatic system, which is essentially the brain's waste clearance system, is most active during deep sleep. When that system is not getting enough time to do its work, the waste accumulates, and that accumulation is associated with the same kind of inflammation and neurological damage we have been discussing. The habits in this video will likely improve your sleep quality over time. Exercise is one of the most effective sleep regulators we know of. Adequate B vitamins support the production of sleep-related neurochemicals. Better cognitive function generally reduces the anxious, overactive nighttime thinking that interferes with sleep depth. But I want to name sleep explicitly because it is the one factor that can undermine all of these other habits if it is severely disrupted. If you are consistently getting fewer than 6 hours or severely fragmented sleep, the cognitive recovery these habits can offer is blunted significantly. It is worth addressing if it is a problem for you. If sleep is a significant issue, that deserves its own conversation and potentially its own medical evaluation. But for most people, the habits we have discussed today, particularly consistent aerobic exercise, will move sleep in the right direction over time. Let me give you a concrete 30-day framework that puts all of this together, because I find that people do much better when they have something specific to follow rather than a list of general principles. In week 1, focus on the 2 easiest habits. Add a daily multivitamin if you do not already take one. Add 1 cup of blueberries to your daily routine, with breakfast or as a snack. That is it for week 1. Do not try to change everything at once. In week 2, add the eggs. 1 to 2 daily, or an equivalent choline source if you prefer fish. By now, the 3 dietary habits are in place, and the routine is beginning to feel normal. In week 3, add your first aerobic exercise session, just one that week. 20 to 30 minutes at a comfortable pace. Notice how you feel afterward. In week 4, add a second weekly session. Build gradually. You are not trying to transform your fitness in 30 days. You are building the habit and the foundation. At the end of 30 days, track what you noticed: energy, focus, recall, mood, sleep quality. Compare it honestly to where you started. Most people who genuinely follow this protocol for 30 days feel different enough to continue. And when they continue for 60, 90, 180 days, the changes become significant. I want to close with something that I think matters beyond the science. The most damaging thing about the conventional narrative of cognitive aging is not that it is wrong, although in important ways it is. The most damaging thing is that it is passive. When people believe decline is inevitable, they stop looking for ways to push back against it. They accommodate it. They adjust their expectations down. They stop challenging their brains, stop moving their bodies as much, stop paying attention to what they eat, because what is the point if nothing changes the outcome anyway? And the accommodation itself, the reduced stimulation, the decreased activity, the nutritional gaps, accelerates exactly the decline that the narrative predicted. The research I have shared with you today tells a different story. Your brain is adaptive. It is responsive. It is genuinely capable of structural growth well into your 60s, your 70s, and beyond. Not in everyone, not under every condition, but far more broadly than most people realize. Age is a factor. I am not going to tell you it is not, but it is not the deciding factor. The deciding factor is the signals you send your brain every day through how you move, what you eat, and how you challenge yourself. You are not a passive observer of your own cognitive health. You are an active participant in it. And the moment you actually internalize that, not just understand it intellectually, but feel it as something true, the way you approach your daily choices begins to change. The 4 habits in this video are not a cure. They are not magic. They are the evidence-backed foundation that gives your brain what it needs to do, what it is already designed to do, which is adapt, rebuild, and grow. Start with the multivitamin. Add the blueberries. Bring the eggs back and take a walk 3 times a week, 45 minutes, and give it the time it deserves. In the next video, I am going to cover one specific daily habit that silently suppresses BDNF, and the data behind it surprised even me. Most people over 50 are doing this every single day without realizing the effect it is having on their brain. Stay healthy. I will see you there.